All right, so picture this. You're stepping into a Victorian home. Think cozy sitting rooms, fireplaces, all that. But what if I told you those homes could be hiding some really dangerous secrets? Today, we're going deep on the hidden perils of the Victorian home.
It really is striking, isn't it, that contrast? They were so focused on creating these beautiful, comfortable homes, but without realizing they were bringing in all these hazards.
Yeah, it's like the downside of progress, right? This
Yeah.
eagerness to embrace the latest and greatest without always, considering the consequences.
Exactly. Think about it. The Industrial Revolution just exploded with mass-produced goods, and boom, everyone wants the newest, shiniest thing. It was like a whole new era of consumerism, like the Great Exhibition of 1851. Remember that?
Yeah, it was like the ultimate showcase.
Exactly. And it totally captured the public's imagination.
Easy to see how people got so caught up in it all. But sometimes that excitement had a dark side.
Right.
Let's talk about something that seems totally harmless. Wallpaper.
Ugh, wallpaper. The ultimate symbol of status, they thought. And that Shields green. So popular, that vivid, vibrant green.
Beautiful color.
Right. But here's the thing. Shields green got its vibrancy from arsenic.
Wait, arsenic. Like the poison.
The one and only. A key ingredient in that gorgeous green pigment. And we're not talking trace amounts here. Some rooms were practically wallpapered with kilograms of arsenic.
So they were basically living in poison. Did they have any clue how dangerous it was?
Well, they knew arsenic was bad if you ate it. But what they didn't fully grasp was that it could be released into the air,
Yeah.
especially in damp conditions, which, let's face it, Victorian homes, pretty common.
Right. Not exactly known for central heating and
Yeah.
good ventilation.
And to make matters worse, certain molds and mildew, which love those damp environments, could react with the arsenic, creating, you guessed it, toxic fumes.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
So just by living in these beautifully wallpapered homes, they were slowly poisoning themselves and their families. And I bet the symptoms have been easy to miss.
Right. Exactly. Headaches, weakness, stomach problems. Sound familiar?
Like a dozen other things going around back then.
Right. Who's going to think, oh, it's the wallpaper making me sick? It's a chilling thought.
It really is. A good reminder that what we surround ourselves with matters, even in ways we might not realize. You mentioned the dampness. It seems like a lot of these dangers were worse because of, well, the way Victorian homes were built.
Absolutely. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. Because even when evidence of these dangers started popping up, not everyone was ready to listen.
Is that where William Morris comes in? He was all about natural materials, craftsmanship, but I read he wasn't so keen on admitting the dangers of, arsenic wallpaper.
It's true. You'd think he'd be leading the charge against it, right? But he actually downplayed the risks, even called those concerns unfounded fears.
That seems a little hypocritical given his stance on, well, everything else.
It's a fascinating contradiction. Makes you think about all the pressures at play back then. You see, Morris was also a director of a major arsenic mine.
Oh, wow. Talk about a conflict of interest.
Right.
Makes you wonder how common that was back then,
Right.
especially with industry booming.
Totally. Was he truly skeptical? Or did his financial interests, cloud his judgment? Tough to say, but it reminds us that even people who are, like, advocates for health and all that can still be influenced by money. It's a tale as old as time.
Isn't it, though? But somebody had to have connected the dots eventually. How did people finally realize the danger?
It often takes something big, like a tragedy almost, to expose those hidden dangers. And for arsenic wallpaper, it seems even Queen Victoria played a part.
Okay, now that's the story I gotta hear. Queen Victoria and poisonous wallpaper. What's the connection?
So story goes, Queen Victoria, she had some of this Shields green wallpaper in one of her own homes, right?
Oh, of course.
And a diplomat visiting from another country, he gets really sick after spending time in a room decked out in this wallpaper.
And they were able to link his illness back to the wallpaper.
Well, medicine back then, not exactly what we have now, but the whole thing caused a stir, you can imagine.
Oh, I bet.
People started talking. Newspapers ran stories. And some early health advocates, they really grabbed onto this. It all put pressure on the manufacturers, like, hey, maybe time to find some safer options.
So it took a near-death experience, practically in the Queen's own house, to make people pay attention. Wild.
It's amazing how these things can be right under our noses.
Speaking of things hidden in plain sight, Victorian fashion.
Mm.
Specifically, the corset. We all know it was restrictive, but how dangerous could a tight garment really be?
The corset is fascinating. You see the clash between societal pressures, ideas of beauty, and then, actual health.
I read about women fainting,
Mm.
because their corsets were laced too tight. Was that common?
Fainting. That was just the start, unfortunately. The whole point of the corset was that hourglass figure, which meant basically squeezing the torso. And I mean squeezing. Internal organs and all.
It's hard to believe something so, like, aesthetic could have that much impact on the body.
Oh, it was significant. Tight lacing, which was everywhere. It restricted breathing by putting pressure right on the diaphragm, the lungs. Over time, it could even deform the rib cage.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah. There are actual medical specimens, deformed livers, organs pushed out of place, all from corsets.
It's incredible what people will endure in the name of fashion. You have to wonder about the pressure they were under. Weren't there movements against corsets back then?
You're thinking of the rational dress movement, late Victorian era,
Okay, right.
led by women who were like, enough. They saw the health risks, how impractical it all was.
They were ahead of their time, advocating for clothing that actually, let them move and participate in the world.
Exactly. It wasn't just corsets, but anything that restricted women.
A good reminder that fashion is never just about fashion.
Never.
It reflects so much more. But moving on from the wardrobe to, well, a potentially even more dangerous room, the kitchen. That's got to be where the Victorians' love of progress really bit back, right?
You said it. I mean, incredible advancements, don't get me wrong, but huge learning curve. And, well, sometimes those consequences were pretty immediate.
We talked about the gaslighting, bringing light, but also bringing danger.
Right. And that same gas, they used it for the stoves, which revolutionary, but also really dangerous in those early days.
I've seen pictures, those big cast iron stoves, right? What made them so dangerous?
Lots of factors. Early designs, often they were sealed systems. So a gas leak, which happened a lot, meant the gas would just build up inside.
Like a ticking time bomb in their kitchen.
I'm starting to think fire insurance back then must have been pricey.
And this was before safety standards, building codes, all that. They were figuring it out as they went, which sometimes meant, boom, explosion in the kitchen.
It's amazing any of these houses survived. Every room had a hidden danger, was anywhere safe. What about the nursery? Surely they'd have been extra careful there.
You would think, wouldn't you? But the nursery, it had its own set of perils, sadly. So the nursery, not exactly a haven from hazards, it seems. What sorts of dangers were lurking there? Please tell me it wasn't arsenic wallpaper again.
Not arsenic, no. But you remember how much the Victorians loved their bright colors, all those vibrant decorations?
Right, right.
Well, that applied to the nursery too. But those colors, often, they hid a danger. Lead.
Lead, you mean like in the paint? But didn't they know about lead paint back then?
You'd think so, but lead was in paint for a long time, even into the 20th century. And it wasn't just walls, it was toys, too. All those lovely painted wooden toys, often lead-based paints.
And of course, kids, they put everything in their mouths, especially the little ones. It's scary to think about. Were they really unaware of the risks?
There was some awareness of lead poisoning, yeah, but not as much as we have today.
Yeah.
And the symptoms, things like, developmental problems, tiredness, stomach issues, those could be anything. Right?
Easily dismissed, yeah.
Exactly. It's one of those things, seems so obvious now, but back then.
A pattern we've seen throughout this whole thing. Not understanding materials, rushing into new technologies, and then, whoops, consequences. But it wasn't just lead in the nursery, was it?
No. Let's talk about baby bottles for a minute.
Okay.
Today, we expect those to be, well, safe, sanitary. But in Victorian times, the bottle itself could be dangerous.
Hold on. How can a baby bottle be dangerous? It's meant for feeding.
It's all about what they didn't know back then. Germs, hygiene, all that. This was before germ theory really took hold. Sterilization, that wasn't really understood. So baby bottles, they were often made of glass, rubber, those sorts of things.
Which, while they seem fine, they're not exactly, what's the word, non-porous.
Exactly. Tiny pores where milk, bacteria, it could get trapped, even with washing. And without proper sterilization.
A breeding ground.
Right. And get this, some of the advice they gave back then actually made it worse.
Worse. What kind of advice are we talking about here?
Some experts, and these were like the leading voices on childcare, they told mothers to leave bottles assembled between uses for weeks to save time.
Weeks? With, like, old milk just sitting there. That's horrifying. No wonder so many infants didn't survive back then.
It really highlights that progress isn't always straightforward. The Victorians, they were making leaps and bounds in some areas, but they didn't always grasp the risks involved.
It makes you appreciate what we have now, that's for sure. Consumer safety, public health, all of it.
Absolutely.
It also makes you think, what are we missing? What will future generations look back on and think, how could they not have known better?
No, that is a question, isn't it?
It really is. Well, that's our deep dive into the Victorian home. A world of beauty, yeah, but also hidden dangers lurking everywhere. So until next time, stay curious and maybe take a closer look at those everyday items we take for granted.